The Arizona sunset painted the desert sky in shades of burnt orange and deep purple as Charlie Hunnam wiped the grease from his hands with an old rag. His small motorcycle repair shop, Hunnam's Custom Bikes, sat on the edge of Prescott Valley, a quiet town where everyone knew everyone else's business. The smell of motor oil and metal filled the air as he locked the garage door, the metallic clang echoing in the growing darkness. "Dad, can we get burgers on the way home?" Mason Parker's voice came from behind him, the 8-year-old boy clutching his Batman backpack with both hands. His brown hair stuck up in different directions, and his sneakers were untied as usual. Charlie looked at his son and felt the familiar tug in his chest, the weight of being both mother and father to this kid, who deserved so much more than what life had dealt him. "Sure, buddy, but we're taking the bike, so hold on tight, okay?" Charlie ruffled Mason's hair and handed him the smaller helmet he'd custom-painted with flames. 3 years had passed since the accident that took Sarah, his wife, and not a day went by that Charlie didn't see her in Mason's smile or hear her laugh in his giggle. They climbed onto Charlie's 2018 Harley-Davidson Road King, a bike he'd restored himself over countless late nights in the shop. The engine roared to life, its familiar rumble vibrating through their bodies as Mason wrapped his small arms around his father's waist. The evening air was cool against their faces as they cruised down Highway 89, passing desert scrub and scattered houses with their porch lights beginning to flicker on. "Dad, look at those clouds!" Mason shouted over the wind, pointing at the darkening sky where storm clouds gathered on the horizon. Charlie nodded, making a mental note to skip the burger run and head straight home before the rain started. Arizona storms could be brutal, and riding in the rain with Mason wasn't something he was willing to risk. They turned onto Copper Basin Road, a shortcut through the older part of town where abandoned warehouses and dimly lit alleys created pockets of darkness between streetlights. Charlie knew this route well. It cut 10 minutes off their ride home. But tonight, something felt different. The air was heavy, charged with more than just the approaching storm. That's when they heard it. A scream. Sharp, desperate, cutting through the rumble of the motorcycle engine like a knife. Charlie's hands instinctively tightened on the handlebars, and he felt Mason's grip around his waist grow stronger. "Dad, did you hear that?" Mason's voice was small, frightened. Charlie slowed the bike, his heart pounding. Every instinct told him to keep going, to get his son home safely, to mind his own business. But then the scream came again, followed by a man's harsh laughter and the sound of something or someone hitting the ground hard. He pulled the bike to the side of the road, near the mouth of an alley between 2 old brick buildings. The headlight illuminated the entrance, but the darkness beyond swallowed the light. "Stay here, Mason. Don't move from this bike. You understand me?" Charlie's voice was firm as he kicked down the stand and climbed off. His hands were shaking, though whether from adrenaline or fear, he couldn't tell. "Dad, what's happening?" Mason whispered, his eyes wide with worry. "Just stay put. I mean it." Charlie reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone, quickly dialing 911 before walking toward the alley. He pressed send, but kept the phone at his side, wanting to assess the situation first before alerting the authorities. As his eyes adjusted to the darkness, the scene before him made his blood run cold. A young woman, maybe in her late 20s, was on the ground, her back against the brick wall of the alley. Her nurse's scrubs were torn at the shoulder, and blood trickled from a cut above her eyebrow. 2 men stood over her, one tall and heavily built with a shaved head and tattoos crawling up his neck, the other shorter but wiry, with a scar running down his left cheek. The tall one held the woman's purse, rifling through it, while the scarred one kicked at her legs when she tried to stand. "Please, just take it. Take everything. Please, just let me go." the woman sobbed, her voice breaking with terror. "Shut up!" the scarred man hissed, raising his boot to kick her again. "Hey!" Charlie's voice boomed through the alley before he could stop himself. Both men turned, their faces twisted with surprise and then anger. Charlie was 6 feet tall and well-built from years of physical labor. But he wasn't a fighter. His heart hammered against his ribs as he raised his phone. "Police are already on their way. Step away from her. Now." The tall man with the tattoos laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "You got a death wish, hero? This ain't your business. I'm making it my business. Let her go." Charlie's voice was steadier than he felt. Behind him, he could hear Mason calling out, "Dad?" And his stomach twisted with regret. He shouldn't have stopped. He should have driven past, called 911 from a safe distance. But it was too late now. The woman looked up at him, her brown eyes filled with a mixture of hope and terror. She was young, with auburn hair pulled back in a ponytail, now disheveled and matted with dirt. Blood stained her white scrubs, and her hands trembled as she tried to push herself up against the wall. The scarred man took a step toward Charlie, pulling something from his jacket, a knife, its blade catching what little light penetrated the alley. "You should have kept riding, old man. Now you're gonna wish you had." Charlie's mind raced. He wasn't armed. He had his phone, his keys, and his fists. The rational part of his brain screamed at him to run, to get back to Mason and get out of there. But the woman's terrified face, the way she looked at him like he was her only chance. He couldn't abandon her. "Dad!" Mason's voice was louder now, closer. Charlie's heart sank as he heard footsteps behind him. He turned his head slightly and saw his son standing at the entrance of the alley, small and vulnerable in the dim light. "Mason, go back to the bike. Now!" But Mason didn't move. His eyes were fixed on the scene, processing what his 8-year-old mind couldn't fully comprehend. His father facing down 2 dangerous men in a dark alley. The boy's presence gave Charlie a surge of desperate courage and paralyzing fear all at once. The tall man lunged first, dropping the purse and charging at Charlie with surprising speed. Charlie sidestepped, using the man's momentum against him, and shoved him hard into the brick wall. The impact was solid, and the man grunted in pain, but he recovered quickly, spinning around with fury in his eyes. The scarred man moved toward the woman again, but she had found her footing and scrambled past him, stumbling toward Charlie. "Help me, please!" she gasped. Charlie caught her arm, steadying her, and pushed her behind him. "Run! Get to the street!" he shouted, but the scarred man was faster. He grabbed her hair and yanked her back, raising the knife. Something inside Charlie snapped. He didn't think. He just moved. He grabbed the nearest thing he could find, a piece of broken pipe lying against the wall, and swung it hard at the scarred man's arm. The pipe connected with a sickening crack, and the knife clattered to the ground. The man howled in pain, clutching his arm, and the woman broke free, running toward the street where Mason stood frozen. The tall man recovered and came at Charlie again, this time landing a solid punch to his jaw. Pain exploded through Charlie's face, and he stumbled backward, tasting blood. His vision blurred for a moment, but he stayed on his feet, driven by the knowledge that Mason was watching, that this woman's life depended on him not giving up. He swung the pipe again, this time catching the tall man in the ribs. The man doubled over, gasping for air, and Charlie didn't wait. He grabbed the woman, who had stopped near Mason, and pushed them both toward the motorcycle. "Get on! Both of you, now!" The scarred man was back on his feet, his face contorted with rage as he retrieved the knife. "You're dead! You hear me? You're dead!" he screamed, starting toward them. Charlie heard sirens in the distance, beautiful, blessed sirens. The 911 call had gone through after all. He climbed onto the bike, pulling Mason in front of him and the woman behind. "Hold on tight," he yelled, and kicked the bike to life. They roared out of the alley just as the two men reached the street. In his rearview mirror, Charlie saw them standing there, the tall one pointing at him, saying something he couldn't hear over the engine. But he saw enough to know this wasn't over. Those men had seen him clearly. They'd seen his bike, and they'd seen his son. The rain started to fall as they raced toward the hospital, fat drops that quickly became a downpour. The woman behind him was shaking, her arms wrapped tightly around his waist, as she sobbed quietly. Mason sat pressed against the gas tank, silent and still in a way that terrified Charlie more than the confrontation had. "It's okay, buddy. We're okay," Charlie said, though he wasn't sure if his son could hear him over the storm and the engine. His jaw throbbed where he'd been hit, and his hands ached from gripping the pipe and the handlebars. But they were alive. They were safe. For now. At Yavapai Regional Medical Center, Charlie pulled up to the emergency entrance and helped the woman off the bike. She was still crying, her whole body trembling. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Thank you so much. I thought they were going to kill me." "You're safe now," Charlie said, though his own voice shook. A security guard rushed over, followed by two nurses with a wheelchair. The woman, Rebecca, she told them her name was Rebecca Hayes, was quickly surrounded by hospital staff asking questions, taking her vitals, documenting her injuries. Charlie stood there with Mason, both of them soaked from the rain, watching as Rebecca was wheeled inside. The adrenaline was wearing off now, replaced by a cold, creeping dread. What had he done? He'd put his son in danger. He'd confronted violent criminals. And those men had seen them. They knew what Charlie looked like, what his bike looked like. "Dad!" Mason's small voice cut through his spiraling thoughts. Charlie looked down at his son, who was staring up at him with wide, uncertain eyes. "Are we in trouble?" Charlie knelt down, ignoring the pain in his jaw and the rain still pouring down on them. He pulled Mason into a tight hug, feeling the boy's small body against his chest. "No, buddy, we're not in trouble. We did the right thing. We helped someone who needed help. But those men were scary. They wanted to hurt you." Mason's voice was muffled against Charlie's shoulder. "I know, but sometimes doing the right thing is scary. And sometimes we have to be brave, even when we're afraid." Charlie pulled back and looked his son in the eyes. "You were very brave tonight, Mason. I'm proud of you. But I need you to promise me something. Next time I tell you to stay put, you stay put. Okay?" Mason nodded, tears mixing with the rain on his cheeks. "I was scared you'd get hurt." "I know, kiddo. I know." Charlie stood up, taking Mason's hand. "Come on, let's get inside and dry off. We need to talk to the police and make sure Rebecca is okay." Inside the hospital, the fluorescent lights were harsh after the darkness of the streets. Charlie gave his statement to two police officers, Officer Jennifer Martinez and Officer David Cole, who took detailed notes about the attack, the location, and the descriptions of the two men. Charlie's jaw was examined by a nurse who confirmed it was bruised but not broken, and she cleaned the small cuts on his hands from handling the rough pipe. Rebecca was in a treatment room, being examined for injuries. Through the partially open door, Charlie could see her sitting on the exam table, still trembling, speaking quietly to a doctor. When she saw him in the hallway, she called out, "Wait, please don't leave yet." Charlie stepped into the room with Mason still holding his hand. Rebecca's face was cleaned now, revealing the full extent of her injuries. A deep cut above her eyebrow that would need stitches, bruising along her jaw and neck, and scrapes on her arms where she'd tried to defend herself. But it was her eyes that struck Charlie the most. the haunted look of someone who'd just come face to face with her own mortality. "I need to know your name," she said, her voice hoarse. "I need to know who saved my life tonight." "Charlie Hunnam. And this is my son, Mason." Charlie squeezed Mason's hand gently. "I'm Rebecca Hayes. I'm a nurse here, actually. I was walking to my car after my shift when—" Her voice broke, and she looked away, blinking rapidly. "When they grabbed me from behind and dragged me into that alley. They wanted my purse, my car keys, everything. And then they wanted—" She stopped, unable to continue. "You don't have to talk about it now," Charlie said quietly. "The important thing is, you're safe. Because of you. Because you stopped." Rebecca wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Most people wouldn't have. Most people would have driven right past. Charlie didn't know what to say to that. He hadn't felt heroic in the alley. He'd felt terrified and stupid and reckless. But looking at Rebecca now, seeing her alive despite what those men had intended, he felt something else. A sense of purpose, maybe. Or validation that despite putting Mason at risk, he'd made the right choice. Officer Martinez appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Hunnam, we're going to need you and your son to come down to the station tomorrow to look at some photos. We think we know who these guys are. Derek Sullivan and Travis Morgan. Both have extensive records for assault, robbery, and drug offenses. If it's them, your identification could help us arrest them quickly." Charlie nodded, though the thought of facing those men again, even in photos, made his stomach turn. "We'll be there. In the meantime, I'd advise you to be cautious. These guys don't take kindly to witnesses, especially ones who interfere with their operations. Do you have somewhere safe to stay tonight?" The question sent a chill through Charlie. He'd been so focused on Rebecca's safety that he hadn't fully processed his own vulnerability. Those men knew what he looked like. They'd threatened him, and they knew he had a son. "We'll go home. We have good locks and a security system." Officer Martinez didn't look convinced, but she nodded. "Keep your phone close and call 911 immediately if you see anything suspicious. We'll have patrol cars in your area tonight." As they left the hospital, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and shimmering under the streetlights. Charlie lifted Mason onto the bike, securing him carefully, and they rode home in silence. The adrenaline had fully worn off now, replaced by exhaustion and a deep, bone-weary fear that Charlie couldn't shake. Their house was a small two-bedroom ranch on the outskirts of town, with a detached garage where Charlie kept his tools and spare bike parts. As they pulled into the driveway, Charlie scanned the shadows, looking for any sign of the men from the alley. But everything was quiet, peaceful even, with crickets chirping and the smell of wet earth in the air. Inside, Charlie locked the door behind them and set the security alarm, something he rarely bothered with. Mason went straight to the bathroom to change out of his wet clothes, moving mechanically, his earlier excitement replaced with a sobering quietness that worried Charlie. Charlie made them both hot chocolate, despite the late hour, and they sat together on the couch, wrapped in blankets. Mason sipped his drink slowly, staring at the TV that wasn't even turned on. "Dad," he finally said, his voice small, "will those men come after us?" Charlie wanted to lie, to tell him everything would be fine, that they were completely safe. But he'd never lied to Mason about important things, and he wasn't going to start now. "I don't know, buddy. The police are looking for them, and they'll probably be arrested soon. But until then, we need to be careful. Stay close to me. Don't go anywhere alone. And if you see anything that scares you, you tell me right away. Okay?" Mason nodded, tears welling up in his eyes. "I'm scared, Dad." "I know. I'm scared too." Charlie pulled his son close, holding him tight. "But we're going to be okay. I promise I'll keep you safe." That night, Charlie barely slept. He kept getting up to check the locks, to peer out the windows, to make sure the security system was armed. Every sound made him jump. A branch scratching against the window, a car driving past, the house settling. He thought about Sarah, about how she would have handled this situation with more grace and wisdom than he possessed. She'd always been the calm one, the rational one, while he was impulsive and emotional. Around 3 in the morning, he finally drifted off, only to be awakened by a nightmare of the alley, of the knife, of Mason standing too close to danger. He sat up in bed, his heart pounding, and realized that everything had changed tonight. He'd crossed a line he couldn't uncross, had made enemies he didn't know how to handle, and had exposed his son to a darkness that no 8-year-old should have to witness. But he'd also saved a life. And as terrifying as that was, as much as it complicated everything, Charlie knew he'd do it again if he had to. Because that's what his father had taught him, what Sarah had believed in, and what he wanted Mason to understand. That sometimes being brave means doing the right thing even when it scares you, even when it costs you something, even when the easier choice would be to look away. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen window as Charlie poured coffee into his favorite mug. A Father's Day gift from Mason, with "World's Best Dad" printed on it in crooked letters. His jaw ached where he'd been punched, the bruise now a deep purple that he couldn't hide. He touched it gingerly and winced, then caught his reflection in the microwave door. He looked tired, older somehow, as if the events of last night had aged him years in a single evening. Mason shuffled into the kitchen in his pajamas, his hair sticking up in all directions. He climbed onto a stool at the counter and rested his chin on his hands, watching Charlie with serious eyes that seemed too old for his 8 years. "Do I have to go to school today?" he asked quietly. Charlie turned from the coffee maker and studied his son. Dark circles shadowed Mason's eyes, and he had the hollow look of someone who hadn't slept well. "Do you want to talk about last night?" Charlie asked, avoiding the question. Mason shrugged, a gesture that Charlie had come to recognize as his son's way of saying yes, while pretending he didn't need to. Charlie poured orange juice into Mason's favorite dinosaur cup and slid it across the counter, then sat down on the stool next to him. "What we saw last night, what happened, it was scary. And it's okay to feel scared, or confused, or angry about it," Charlie began, choosing his words carefully. "I shouldn't have stopped with you on the bike. I should have driven past and called the police from somewhere safe. That was a mistake on my part, and I'm sorry you had to see all of that." "But you saved her," Mason said, looking up at his father. "That lady, Rebecca, she would have died if you didn't stop. Maybe. Or maybe the police would have arrived in time if I'd called them sooner. The point is, I put you in danger, and that's something I have to live with." Charlie ran a hand through his hair, frustrated with himself. Being a hero isn't always about jumping into action. Sometimes it's about making smart decisions that keep the people you love safe. Mason was quiet for a long moment, swirling his orange juice in its cup. "But you did keep me safe, and you kept Rebecca safe too. Isn't that what matters?" The simplicity of his son's logic made Charlie's chest tighten. "Yeah, buddy, I guess it is." He pulled Mason into a one-armed hug. "But today, we're going to be extra careful. We have to go to the police station to identify those men, and then I'm dropping you off at Grandma's house for the afternoon while I go to work. No arguments." Mason nodded against his shoulder. "Will Rebecca be okay?" "I think so. She's tough. She's a nurse, so she knows how to take care of herself." Charlie released him and stood up. "Now go get dressed. We need to leave in 30 minutes. The Prescott Valley Police Department was a modern brick building on the east side of town, with a parking lot that was already half full despite the early hour. Charlie held Mason's hand tightly as they walked through the automatic doors into a lobby that smelled of coffee and floor cleaner. Officer Martinez was waiting for them, dressed in civilian clothes, jeans and a button-down shirt, her badge clipped to her belt. "Mr. Hunnam, Mason, thanks for coming in," she said, shaking Charlie's hand. Her grip was firm, professional. "We've pulled together a photo array of possible suspects. If you can identify the men from last night, it'll give us probable cause to bring them in for questioning." They were led to a small conference room with beige walls and a table covered in photographs arranged in 2 groups of 6. Charlie recognized them immediately. The tall man with the neck tattoos in the first array, the scarred man in the second. His stomach turned as he pointed them out. "That's them, number 3 and number 5, Charlie said, his voice steady despite the nausea he felt. Officer Martinez nodded grimly. "Derek Sullivan and Travis Morgan, just as we suspected. Both are on parole for aggravated assault and armed robbery. This violation will send them back to prison for a long time, especially with the additional charges from last night." She made notes on a legal pad. "We've already issued warrants for their arrest. Officers are checking their last known addresses and known associate locations now." "How long until they're caught?" Charlie asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. "Could be hours, could be days. These guys know how to disappear when they want to." Martinez's expression softened as she looked at Mason, who had been sitting quietly, swinging his legs from the chair. "You did a brave thing last night, both of you. But I want you to understand that until these men are in custody, you need to be vigilant. They may not even know who you are or where to find you, but we can't take chances." Charlie's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out and saw a text from an unknown number. "I heard what you did last night. That was incredibly brave. How are you and Mason doing? Rebecca Hayes." He showed the message to Martinez. "Is it okay if I respond to her?" "Of course. Mrs. Hayes gave us your number in case she remembered any additional details about the attack. She was released from the hospital early this morning." Martinez stood up, gathering her notes. "I'll walk you out. And Mr. Hunnam, Charlie, please don't hesitate to call if anything feels off. Trust your instincts." In the parking lot, Charlie texted Rebecca back, while Mason climbed into the truck Charlie had driven today instead of the motorcycle. "We're okay, sore but alive. How are you holding up?" The response came within seconds. "Physically okay. Emotionally a mess. Would it be weird if I asked to meet you for coffee sometime? I'd like to thank you properly. And I think I need to talk to someone who understands what happened." Charlie stared at the message, uncertain how to respond. He didn't know this woman beyond their shared trauma. But something in her message resonated with him. The need to process the violence they'd witnessed with someone who'd been there, who understood in a way that even well-meaning friends couldn't. He typed back, "Not weird at all. How about tomorrow afternoon? There's a cafe called Mountain View on Miller Valley Road. 2 p.m.? Perfect. Thank you, Charlie, for everything." Charlie pocketed his phone and climbed into the truck, where Mason was already buckled in, clutching his backpack. "Who were you texting?" Mason asked. "Rebecca, the woman we helped last night. She wants to meet up and talk about what happened." Charlie started the engine and backed out of the parking space. "Is she your girlfriend now?" Mason asked with the blunt curiosity of a child. Charlie couldn't help but laugh, though it came out more strained than he intended. "No, buddy. She's just someone who went through something scary, same as us. Sometimes it helps to talk to people who understand." They dropped Mason off at Charlie's mother's house, a cozy bungalow with a garden full of roses and a porch swing where Charlie had spent countless hours as a kid. Linda Hunnam was a formidable woman in her early 60s, with silver hair cut short and glasses that she wore on a chain around her neck. She took one look at the bruise on Charlie's jaw and the dark circles under Mason's eyes and knew immediately that something was wrong. "What happened?" she demanded, ushering Mason inside with promises of fresh-baked cookies while fixing Charlie with a stern look. Charlie told her everything, watching her expression shift from concern to anger, to fear, and back to concern. When he finished, she gripped his arm tightly. "You could have been killed. Mason could have been hurt." "I know, Mom, I know. But what was I supposed to do? Let them kill her?" Charlie's voice was defensive, tired. "You were supposed to call the police and not put my grandson in danger," Linda said sharply, then sighed and pulled him into a hug. "But I'm glad you're okay, both of you, and I'm proud of you for helping that woman, even if it was reckless. Can you keep Mason here until I close the shop tonight? I don't want him going home until I've checked everything out, made sure nobody's been snooping around." Charlie pulled back from the hug, looking at his mother seriously. "Of course. He can spend the night if you need. We'll make it an adventure. Movies and popcorn." Linda glanced toward the living room, where Mason was already sprawled on the couch with a cookie in each hand. "But Charlie, you be careful. Those men sound dangerous." "I will. I promise." Charlie kissed his mother's cheek and headed back to his truck, the weight of responsibility pressing down on him like a physical thing. Hunnam's Custom Bikes was located in an industrial area on the edge of town, surrounded by warehouses and auto body shops. Charlie unlocked the rolling garage door and surveyed his domain. Motorcycles in various states of repair, tools organized meticulously on pegboards, and the smell of oil and metal that had become as familiar as home. This was his sanctuary, the place where he could lose himself in the mechanical logic of engines and exhaust systems, where problems had solutions and everything made sense. But today, the shop felt different, exposed. He found himself checking the windows every few minutes, jumping at the sound of cars passing by on the street. Around noon, James "Bear" Thompson stopped by, as he did most days. Bear was a mountain of a man, 6'4", and built like the linebacker he'd been in high school before joining the Marines. Now 52, with a graying beard and tattoos covering both arms, he was Charlie's oldest friend and the de facto leader of a local motorcycle club called the Desert Riders. "Heard you had some excitement last night," Bear said, leaning against the workbench where Charlie was rebuilding a carburetor. His voice was a low rumble, like distant thunder. "News travels fast," Charlie muttered, not looking up from his work. "Small town. Plus, my cousin works dispatch at the police department. She mentioned a call about a motorcycle rider who broke up an assault." Bear crossed his arms. "You want to tell me what the hell you were thinking? Taking on two guys with Mason right there?" Charlie set down his wrench and finally met Bear's eyes. "I wasn't thinking. I heard her screaming and I couldn't not do something." Bear was quiet for a moment, studying Charlie with the intensity that had made him an effective Marine Corps sergeant. "You did the right thing," he finally said, "but it was also stupid. Those guys, Derek Sullivan and Travis Morgan, they run with a rough crowd. Dealers mostly, but they're not above violence. You made yourself a target. The police are looking for them. They'll be arrested soon." Charlie tried to sound confident, but even he didn't believe it fully. "Maybe. And maybe they'll lay low for a while, then come looking for payback when things cool down. That's how guys like that operate." Bear pulled up a stool and sat down, his considerable weight making the metal creak. "Look, I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to make sure you understand the situation. You need to be smart about this." "What do you suggest?" Charlie asked, genuine concern creeping into his voice. "First, you don't go anywhere alone for a while. Second, you make sure your security system at home is working properly. Third, and this is the important one, you let me and the boys from the club know if you need backup. We look after our own, Charlie. You know that. The Desert Riders wasn't a criminal organization, despite what some people in town might think. They were mostly veterans and working-class guys who liked to ride motorcycles and help their community. They organized charity runs, volunteered at the VA hospital, and looked out for each other. Bear had been trying to get Charlie to join officially for years, but Charlie had always been too busy with work and raising Mason. I appreciate that, Bear, really, but I don't want to drag you guys into my problems. Charlie picked up the wrench again, needing something to do with his hands. Too late. You're already part of the club, whether you wear the patch or not. Sarah was like a sister to half of us, and Mason's our nephew. What affects you affects us. Bear stood up, his presence filling the small shop. I'm serious, Charlie. If you see those guys anywhere near your home or your shop, you call me immediately, day or night. Understood? Charlie nodded, feeling a mixture of gratitude and guilt. He didn't want to put his friends in danger, but the truth was, he didn't know how to handle this situation alone. Understood. Thanks, Bear. Don't mention it. Now, I came by because I need you to look at my bike. The clutch is slipping again. Bear gestured toward his massive Harley-Davidson Road Glide parked outside. They spent the next hour working on Bear's motorcycle, falling into the comfortable rhythm of mechanical work and casual conversation. It was a relief to focus on something concrete, something fixable, rather than the abstract threat hanging over Charlie's head. But even as he worked, part of his mind was elsewhere. Thinking about Rebecca and tomorrow's coffee meeting, about Mason staying at his grandmother's house, about Derek Sullivan and Travis Morgan out there somewhere, possibly planning revenge. Around 4 o'clock, Charlie's phone rang. It was Officer Martinez. Mr. Hunnam, I wanted to update you. We found Travis Morgan at his girlfriend's apartment about an hour ago. He's in custody and being processed now. Relief flooded through Charlie. What about the other one? Derek Sullivan? Still at large. Sullivan doesn't have as many known associates, which makes him harder to track. But we've got alerts out to all neighboring counties. And his photo is being circulated. It's only a matter of time. Martinez paused. In the meantime, I'd still recommend caution. Sullivan might not even know who you are or bother looking for you, but we can't rule it out. After hanging up, Charlie relayed the information to Bear, who nodded approvingly. 1 down, 1 to go. That's good news. But Martinez is right. Stay alert until they get Sullivan, too. Charlie closed the shop early that evening, something he rarely did. He drove to his mother's house and picked up Mason, who had spent the day being thoroughly spoiled with cookies, video games, and stories about Charlie's childhood misadventures. On the drive home, Mason was more talkative than he'd been that morning, chattering about the Lego castle he'd built with Grandma and the movie they'd watched. Grandma says you were a troublemaker when you were my age, Mason said, grinning. She said you once took apart her vacuum cleaner to see how it worked and couldn't put it back together. Charlie laughed, a genuine sound that felt good after the tension of the day. That's true. She was not happy about that. Had to buy a new vacuum. He glanced at Mason in the rearview mirror. How are you feeling today, buddy? About everything that happened? Mason's smile faded slightly. Better, I guess. Grandma said you were brave. She said sometimes being brave means doing scary things to help people. Your grandma's a smart lady. Charlie turned onto their street, automatically scanning for anything unusual. Everything looked normal. Neighbors watering their lawns, kids riding bikes, the familiar landscape of suburban life. He pulled into their driveway and noted with satisfaction that everything was as he'd left it that morning. Inside, they fell into their evening routine. Homework at the kitchen table while Charlie made dinner, which tonight was spaghetti with jarred sauce, Mason's favorite. They ate together, talking about school and Mason's upcoming science project on volcanoes. For a little while, it almost felt normal, like the events of the previous night were just a bad dream. But as darkness fell and Charlie tucked Mason into bed, reality crept back in. He checked all the locks twice, armed the security system, and settled onto the couch with his laptop to check his emails and the security camera feed from the shop. Everything was quiet. Too quiet, maybe. His phone chimed with another text from Rebecca. "Thank you again for agreeing to meet tomorrow. I've been thinking about what happened all day, and I really need to talk to someone. I hope that's okay." Charlie typed back, "It's okay. I've been thinking about it too. See you tomorrow at 2. He stared at the message thread for a long moment, wondering what it meant that this woman, this stranger he'd met under the worst possible circumstances, felt like the only person who might truly understand what he was going through. Bear understood danger and violence from his military service, and his mother understood fear for a child's safety. But Rebecca understood the specific terror of that alley, the faces of those men, the moment when everything could have gone so much worse. Charlie turned off the lights and lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. His jaw still throbbed, and every sound made him tense. But eventually, exhaustion won out over anxiety, and he drifted into an uneasy sleep filled with dreams of dark alleys and flashing knives, and Mason's voice calling, "Dad?" over and over again. Tomorrow, he'd meet Rebecca and maybe start to make sense of all this. But tonight, he just needed to rest and be grateful that they were safe, that one of the attackers was in custody, and that tomorrow was another day. In the darkness of his bedroom, with his son sleeping safely down the hall, Charlie allowed himself to hope that maybe the worst was over. He was wrong. Mountain View Cafe sat on a corner lot with large windows overlooking the street, the kind of place where locals gathered to sip overpriced lattes and work on laptops. Charlie arrived 15 minutes early, a habit ingrained from years of managing a business where being on time meant being late. He ordered a black coffee and claimed a table near the back, away from the windows, a precaution that felt both necessary and paranoid. His jaw still hurt when he chewed, the bruise now a mottled yellow-green that makeup couldn't fully conceal. He'd considered canceling this meeting a dozen times since waking up that morning, unsure of what to say to Rebecca Hayes or why she wanted to see him. But something, curiosity maybe, or a sense of obligation, kept him from sending that cancellation text. Rebecca arrived exactly at 2 o'clock, and Charlie recognized her immediately, despite looking so different from the terrified woman in torn scrubs. She wore jeans and a soft blue sweater, her auburn hair down around her shoulders, and oversized sunglasses that she removed as she entered the cafe. But it was her hands Charlie noticed most. They trembled slightly as she scanned the room, and when her eyes found his, the relief in her expression was palpable. She ordered something complicated with extra foam and joined him at the table, setting her purse carefully on the chair beside her, as if it might disappear if she let it out of her sight. "Hi," she said softly, and Charlie noticed the stitches above her eyebrow, the faint bruising along her jawline that her makeup couldn't quite hide. "Hi, how are you doing?" Charlie asked, then immediately felt stupid. How was she supposed to be doing after what she'd been through? Honestly, I'm a mess. Rebecca wrapped both hands around her coffee cup, as if trying to draw warmth from it, even though the cafe was pleasantly comfortable. I haven't slept more than a few hours since it happened. Every sound makes me jump. I can't walk to my car without looking over my shoulder. The hospital gave me a few days off, which is probably good because I don't think I could focus on patient care right now. Charlie nodded, recognizing all of it. I've been checking the locks on my doors about 20 times a night. And I keep seeing their faces, those men, every time I close my eyes. You too? Rebecca looked up at him, something like relief crossing her features. I thought maybe I was overreacting. My sister keeps telling me I'll feel better once they catch both of them, but I don't know if that's true. What if I never feel safe again? They caught one of them yesterday. Travis Morgan, the one with the scar. He's in custody. Charlie sipped his coffee, watching Rebecca's reaction. I know. Officer Martinez called me. But the other one, Derek Sullivan, he's still out there. Rebecca's hands tightened around her cup. And he's the one who scares me most. He was the leader, the one calling the shots. Travis just followed orders. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of shared trauma hanging between them. Around them, the cafe hummed with the normal sounds of life. Conversations, the hiss of the espresso machine, the clink of cups and spoons. It all felt surreal to Charlie, this normalcy existing side by side with the violence they'd witnessed. Can I ask you something? Rebecca said finally. Why did you stop? Most people wouldn't have. Most people would have called the police and kept driving. But you stopped, and you brought your son into danger to help a complete stranger. Why? Charlie had asked himself the same question 100 times in the past 2 days. I don't know if I have a good answer. I heard you screaming and I just couldn't keep going. My wife died 3 years ago in a car accident, and sometimes I think about all the people who drove past before someone finally stopped to help her. By the time the ambulance arrived, it was too late. Maybe I stopped for you because I wish someone had stopped sooner for her. Rebecca's eyes glistened with unshed tears. I'm so sorry about your wife, and I'm sorry you had to go through that. She reached across the table and briefly touched his hand, a gesture of comfort that felt more intimate than it probably should have. But I'm grateful you stopped. They were going to kill me, Charlie. I know that sounds dramatic, but after they took my purse and my phone, Travis said to Derek, we should get rid of her. She's seen our faces. If you hadn't shown up when you did. She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. Charlie had heard enough violence in Bear's stories from Iraq to know that witnesses were liabilities to men like Derek Sullivan and Travis Morgan. You don't have to thank me, he said quietly. I just did what anyone should do. But most people don't. That's the point. Rebecca pulled her hand back and wiped at her eyes with a napkin. I've been a nurse for 6 years. I've seen people at their worst and their best. And what you did, risking yourself and putting your son in danger to save someone you didn't know, that's rare. That's special. Charlie felt uncomfortable with the praise, with being called a hero when he still questioned his own judgment. My son thinks I'm brave, but the truth is, I was terrified. I'm still terrified, not just for me, but for Mason. Those men saw him. They know I have a kid. What if they come after him to get back at me? Have you thought about staying somewhere else until they catch Derek? Rebecca asked, her nurse's practicality showing through. I have. But Mason's in school. I have a business to run. And I can't just uproot our entire lives because of what might happen. Charlie rubbed his temples, feeling a headache building behind his eyes. The police have increased patrols in my neighborhood, and I have friends keeping an eye out. Plus, Derek might not even care about revenge. He might just be focused on staying free. Or he might be planning something. Rebecca's voice was soft but serious. I know that sounds paranoid, but these men, they weren't random opportunists. Travis told Officer Martinez during his interrogation that they'd been watching me for weeks. They knew my schedule, knew I walked to my car alone after late shifts. This was planned. A chill ran down Charlie's spine. They targeted you specifically? Apparently. Martinez thinks they were going to rob me, and then... Rebecca's voice broke slightly. Do other things. She said Travis implied as much in his statement. When you showed up, you didn't just interrupt a mugging, you interrupted something much worse. The reality of what Charlie had stumbled into settled over him like a weight. This wasn't just a random act of violence he'd interrupted. It was a planned attack by dangerous men who now had every reason to see him as an enemy. "Jesus," he whispered. "I'm sorry. I probably shouldn't have told you that." Martinez said they're trying to use Travis's statement to build a stronger case against Derek, to make sure he stays locked up for a long time when they catch him. Rebecca took a long sip of her coffee, composing herself. "But you deserve to know what you really saved me from." They talked for another hour, the conversation shifting to safer topics: Mason's school, Rebecca's family, two sisters and parents who lived in Phoenix, Charlie's work at the shop, Rebecca's dreams of someday becoming a nurse practitioner. It was strange how easy it was to talk to her, how the shared trauma had created an instant connection that would normally take months to develop. "Can I ask you something personal?" Charlie said, as they prepared to leave. "Do you have someone? A boyfriend, husband, someone to help you through this?" Rebecca shook her head. "No. I broke up with my boyfriend about 6 months ago. He was not a good person. Controlling, jealous, the kind of guy who didn't like me working late shifts because he thought I was cheating on him. Breaking up with him was one of the best decisions I ever made, but it means I'm going through this alone. Well, except for my sisters and my parents, but they live 4 hours away." "You're not alone," Charlie heard himself say. "I know we just met, and this is a weird situation. But if you need someone to talk to, someone who understands what happened, you can call me. Anytime." Rebecca smiled, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her. "Thank you. That means more than you know. And the same goes for you. If you need to talk, or if you're checking your locks at 2 in the morning and need someone to tell you you're not crazy, call me." They exchanged numbers properly this time, no longer mediated through police officers, and walked out of the cafe together. The afternoon sun was bright and warm, a stark contrast to the darkness they'd been discussing. Charlie walked Rebecca to her car, a sensible Honda Civic with a nursing school parking sticker still on the bumper, and waited while she unlocked it and climbed inside. "Be careful," he said before closing her door. "You too. And Charlie?" She looked up at him through the open window. "Thank you again for everything." Charlie watched her drive away, then climbed into his own truck and sat there for a moment, processing the conversation. He felt better somehow, less alone in his fear and confusion. Rebecca understood in a way that even Bear and his mother couldn't, and knowing he could call her if things got worse was a comfort he hadn't expected. His phone rang, shattering the moment. It was the elementary school. "Mr. Hunnam, this is Principal Winters." "Nothing's wrong," she added quickly, probably hearing the panic in his sharp intake of breath. "But I wanted to let you know that a man came to the school this afternoon asking about Mason." Charlie's blood ran cold. "What man? What did he want?" "He said he was your brother and needed to pick Mason up for a family emergency. But when we asked him to provide identification and show that he was on Mason's authorized pickup list, he became agitated and left. We followed protocol exactly, and Mason never left his classroom. He doesn't even know about this." "I don't have a brother," Charlie said, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. What did this man look like? Tall, maybe 6'2", heavy build, bald head, and I noticed he had extensive tattoos on his neck. He was wearing sunglasses, so I didn't get a good look at his face. We've already called the police and filed a report. They're sending an officer to take our statements. Derek Sullivan. It had to be. He'd found out where Mason went to school and tried to take him. The realization sent waves of terror and rage through Charlie in equal measure. I'm on my way. Don't let Mason out of your sight. Mr. Hunnam, he's safe here. We've locked down the campus, and we won't release any students until parents or authorized guardians show ID at the office. But you should know, this man may come back. Charlie was already speeding toward the school, running a red light and nearly causing an accident in his panic. He called Bear with shaking hands. Derek Sullivan just tried to take Mason from school. What? When? Bear's voice went from casual to combat ready in an instant. Just now. The school stopped him. But Bear, he knows where Mason goes to school. He tried to take my son. Charlie's voice cracked on the last word. I'm calling the guys. We're going to the school right now. And then we're setting up watch at your house and your shop. This son of a bitch isn't getting anywhere near your kid. Bear was already shouting orders to someone in the background. You get to that school and you get Mason, and then you bring him to my place. Jenny's home and we've got the security system. You'll both stay here until Derek is caught. No arguments. Okay, thank you. Charlie ended the call and pressed harder on the accelerator, grateful for Bear's decisiveness when his own mind was spinning with fear and fury. At the school, 2 police cars were already in the parking lot. Charlie ran inside to find Mason sitting in the principal's office, playing a game on a borrowed iPad, completely unaware of the danger he'd been in. When he saw his father, he grinned. Dad, Principal Winters said, I get to play games until you got here. Can we get McDonald's for dinner? Charlie dropped to his knees and pulled Mason into a crushing hug, not trusting himself to speak for a moment. Over Mason's shoulder, he met Principal Winters' sympathetic gaze. She was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a bun, and she'd been Mason's principal since kindergarten. We've given the police a full description, and we're reviewing security footage from the front entrance, she said quietly. I've also alerted all our staff to be extra vigilant. Mason won't leave this building with anyone but you, or someone we verify is on his authorized list. Charlie nodded, still holding Mason. Thank you for following protocol, for calling me, for keeping him safe. It's literally my job, but you're welcome. She smiled at Mason. You can take that iPad with you if you want, Mason. Bring it back on Monday. Officer Martinez arrived as they were leaving, looking grim. Mr. Hunnam, we need to talk. This changes things. Derek Sullivan isn't just hiding. He's actively targeting you and your family. We're escalating this to a priority manhunt, and I'm assigning protective surveillance to your home. We're not going home. We're staying with a friend who has better security. Charlie gestured to Bear, who had arrived with 3 other members of the Desert Riders, all looking like they were ready for war. But thank you. And please, catch this guy before he hurts someone else. We're doing everything we can. In the meantime, I need you to consider getting a restraining order. Though, honestly, Sullivan's violated enough laws that one more piece of paper won't make much difference. Just be smart. Stay in groups. Don't go anywhere alone. And call me immediately if you see him or anything suspicious. Bear's house was a fortress. A 2-story home on 5 acres outside of town, surrounded by security cameras and motion sensors that Bear had installed himself. His wife Jenny, a cheerful woman with short blonde hair and a warm smile, greeted them at the door with fresh-baked cookies and an inflatable mattress already set up in the spare bedroom. You'll stay as long as you need, she said firmly, brooking no argument. Mason, do you like dogs? Because we have 3, and they're very friendly. As Mason was swept away by Jenny and a pack of excited golden retrievers, Charlie sank onto the couch in Bear's living room, suddenly exhausted. Bear sat across from him, arms crossed, his expression serious. We need to talk about what happens when they catch Derek, Bear said. Because after this, after he tried to take Mason, You're going to be looking over your shoulder for the rest of your life. Even if he goes to prison for 20 years, you'll always wonder if he's getting out, if he's still holding a grudge, if he's coming for you. What are you suggesting? Charlie asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know. I'm suggesting that once this is over, you seriously consider joining the club officially. Not as a weekend hobby, but as family. Because the Desert Riders protect their own. And if you're wearing our patch, anyone who comes after you or Mason will have to go through all of us. It's not a perfect solution, but it's better than handling this alone. Charlie had never wanted to join a motorcycle club, had always seen it as one more thing that would take time away from Mason. But now, faced with the reality of what could happen when you crossed dangerous men, the idea of having a brotherhood to back him up was appealing. "Let me think about it," he said finally, after Derek is caught and things settle down. "Fair enough." Bear stood up and clapped Charlie on the shoulder. "Now come on. Jenny made her famous chili, and the guys are coming over for dinner. You're going to eat, you're going to breathe, and you're going to remember that you're not alone in this." That night, surrounded by Bear's family and the Desert Riders, Charlie did feel less alone. Mason was laughing, playing with the dogs, acting like a normal 8-year-old instead of a kid whose life had been threatened. And for the first time since that night in the alley, Charlie allowed himself to hope that maybe they would get through this okay. But in the back of his mind, one thought kept circling. Derek Sullivan was still out there, and he knew where Mason went to school. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. 3 days passed in a strange limbo of hypervigilance and forced normalcy. Charlie and Mason stayed at Bear's house, where the routines of daily life continued under the shadow of threat. Mason went to school with an escort, either Bear or one of the other Desert Riders, men with military backgrounds who took the responsibility seriously. Charlie returned to his shop during daylight hours only, with at least one club member always nearby. Rebecca texted daily, checking in, sharing her own struggles with paranoia and sleeplessness. The connection between them was growing, built on shared trauma and mutual understanding. But Derek Sullivan remained ghost. Every reported sighting led nowhere. Every tip called into the police turned out to be a false alarm. It was as if he'd vanished completely, which somehow made his absence more terrifying than his presence would have been. Officer Martinez updated Charlie regularly, her frustration evident. He's not using his phone, not accessing his bank accounts, not contacting known associates. Someone's helping him hide, or he's holed up somewhere off the grid. On Thursday afternoon, Charlie was at the shop working on a vintage Indian motorcycle when his phone rang. It was Principal Winters again, and his stomach immediately knotted. "Mr. Hunnam, Mason is fine," she said quickly. "But we've had another incident. A different man this time, claiming to be Mason's uncle. When we asked for identification, he left immediately. We've called the police, but I thought you should know. I'm on my way." Charlie was already grabbing his keys, shouting to Tommy Rodriguez, one of the Desert Riders who was sweeping the shop floor, to lock up. Derek sent someone else. They're trying different approaches. At the school, security footage showed a different man, shorter, stocky, with a baseball cap pulled low. But the tattoos on his forearms matched a known associate of Derek Sullivan's, a dealer named Marcus Webb. The police were already looking for him, adding another warrant to their growing list. "This is escalating," Officer Martinez said, watching the footage for the third time. "Sullivan isn't giving up. He's actively recruiting help and planning multiple attempts. We need to consider relocating you and Mason until this is resolved." "Relocate where? For how long? I have a business, Mason has school, we have a life here." Charlie's frustration boiled over. "When are you going to catch this guy? It's been almost a week." "We're doing everything we can, Mr. Hunnam. But Sullivan has experience evading law enforcement, and he's smart enough to know we're watching all his usual haunts. Right now, your safety is the priority." Martinez's voice was professional but sympathetic. "Have you considered temporary relocation out of state? Family elsewhere?" "My mother's here. I don't have any other family." Charlie ran a hand through his hair, exhaustion and stress written in every line of his face. "What about Rebecca Hayes? Is she safe?" "They know she's a witness too. Ms. Hayes has been staying with her parents in Phoenix since the incident at your son's school. We recommended she leave the area, and she agreed. She's safe." Martinez closed her laptop. "I'm recommending the same for you." That evening, at Bear's house, Charlie called a family meeting of sorts. Bear and Jenny, a few trusted desert riders, and his mother Linda, who'd driven over as soon as she heard about the second attempt at Mason's school. Mason was upstairs in the guest room, playing video games with Bear's nephew, oblivious to the serious conversation happening below. "I can't keep living like this," Charlie said, pacing the length of Bear's living room. "Mason can't keep going to school with armed escorts. I can't keep looking over my shoulder every second. Something has to change." "The police will catch him eventually," Linda said, though her voice lacked conviction. "You just have to be patient and stay safe." "And what if they don't? What if Derek stays hidden for months, years even? Do we just put our lives on hold indefinitely?" Charlie's voice rose with frustration. "I'm starting to think we should just leave. Pack up, move to another state, start over somewhere Derek Sullivan can't find us." "That's exactly what he wants," Bear said firmly. "For you to run, to give up your home and your business. And even if you move, there's no guarantee he won't find you eventually. Guys like Derek, they're persistent when they feel disrespected. Then, what do you suggest? Because I'm out of ideas here." Charlie sank onto the couch, defeated. Bear exchanged a look with Tommy Rodriguez and Frank Chen, two other club members who'd been quietly listening. "There might be another option," Bear said slowly, "but you're not going to like it. I'm listening. We set a trap. We use you as bait to draw Derek out, but in a controlled environment where we have the advantage. Somewhere public enough that he has to approach carefully, but isolated enough that we can corner him once he shows." Bear leaned forward, his expression serious. "The police won't officially condone this, but Martinez and I have talked. If we can get Derek to make a move in a situation where there are enough witnesses and cameras to document everything, they can take him into custody without any questions about excessive force or illegal search. You want to use my son as bait?" Linda's voice was sharp with anger. "No. Mason stays here with you and Jenny, completely safe. But Derek doesn't know that. If Charlie makes it look like he's dropping his guard, going back to his normal routine, Derek might take the opportunity to make a move." Bear looked at Charlie. "It's risky, and I won't pretend it isn't. But it might be the fastest way to end this." Charlie's mind raced through the implications. Where would this happen? How would we set it up? "Your shop. Tomorrow night, late. You make a social media post about working late on a special project. Make it public so anyone watching can see it. Then, you're there alone. Or apparently alone. In reality, Tommy, Frank, and I are positioned inside, where Derek can't see us. Police are on standby a block away. When Derek shows up, we give him enough rope to prove his intent. Then we take him down and call it in." Bear's plan was detailed, thought through. He's wanted for attempted kidnapping now, on top of assault and attempted murder charges from the attack on Rebecca. He's looking at serious prison time, which makes him desperate. Desperate men make mistakes. "And if it doesn't work? If he doesn't show?" Charlie asked. "Then we try something else." "But Charlie, every day this drags on, you and Mason are in danger. This is a way to take control of the situation instead of just reacting to it. Linda was shaking her head. This is insane. You're talking about vigilante justice. What if someone gets hurt? What if Derek brings a gun? We'll have body armor, we'll have weapons, and we'll have the element of surprise. Derek will think Charlie's alone and vulnerable, but he'll be walking into a trap. Bear's confidence was unwavering. I've done this kind of thing before, Linda. In Iraq, we ran dozens of operations just like this. We know what we're doing. Charlie looked at his mother, seeing the fear and disapproval in her eyes. Then he thought about Mason, about the terror of those 2 attempts to take his son, about the weeks or months of paranoia that stretched ahead if they didn't end this soon. I'll do it, he said, but we do it smart, with the police knowing the plan and with enough safeguards that Derek can't hurt anyone, and Mason stays completely out of it. He doesn't even know it's happening. Agreed. Bear pulled out his phone. I'll call Martinez and set it up for tomorrow night. You're going to post on Facebook around 6. Say you're working late on a custom build for a client. We'll be in position by 8, and we'll wait however long it takes. The next 24 hours were the longest of Charlie's life. He went through the motions of normalcy, took Mason to school with Tommy as escort, worked at the shop, had lunch with his mother, all while knowing what was coming that night. Rebecca called in the afternoon, sensing something was wrong from his clipped text responses. "Charlie, what's going on? You sound different," she said, concern clear in her voice. He told her everything, the plan, the trap, the risk. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "You're using yourself as bait," Rebecca finally said. "That's incredibly brave and incredibly stupid. It's the only way to end this. I can't keep living in fear, and I can't let Mason grow up thinking this is normal." Charlie was in his truck in the shop's parking lot, speaking quietly, even though no one was around to overhear. "I can't let Mason grow up thinking this is normal. I understand, I really do. But please be careful. Derek is dangerous, and cornered animals are unpredictable." Rebecca paused. "Promise me you'll call me when it's over? No matter what happens, I need to know you're okay. I promise." Charlie ended the call and sat in his truck for a few more minutes, gathering his courage for what was coming. At 6 o'clock, Charlie posted on Facebook, "Working late tonight on a custom Indian Scout build for a special client. Nothing like the quiet of the shop after hours to really focus on the details. Custom bikes. Late night grind. Ha Hunnam Custom Bikes." The post was public, visible to anyone who might be watching his social media. Within minutes, it had likes and comments from friends and customers. Charlie turned off his phone notifications and headed to Bear's house for what might be his last normal dinner with Mason for a while. By 8 o'clock, Charlie was back at the shop, this time with Bear, Tommy Rodriguez, and Frank Chen hidden in the office and storage areas. All 3 wore body armor under their jackets and carried licensed firearms. Police were stationed 2 blocks away, ready to respond on Bear's signal. Officer Martinez herself was in an unmarked car across the street, watching through binoculars. Charlie worked on the Indian Scout, actually working, not pretending, trying to keep his hands steady as he adjusted the carburetor. The shop's main lights were on, the garage door partially raised to show anyone watching that he was alone and vulnerable. His heart hammered against his ribs, and every sound from the street made him flinch. 9 o'clock came and went. Then 10. Charlie was beginning to think Derek wouldn't show, that maybe he'd seen through the trap, or simply didn't care enough about revenge to risk capture. But at 10:47 p.m., he heard it. Footsteps outside, careful and deliberate, followed by the scrape of something metal against concrete. Charlie's breath caught in his throat. Through the partially raised garage door, he saw a shadow move. A tall figure, broad-shouldered, moving with purpose toward the shop. Derek Sullivan. Even in the dim light from the street lamps, Charlie recognized the shaved head, the neck tattoos, the predatory way he moved. Derek stepped into the pool of light cast by the shop's fluorescent overheads, and Charlie saw he wasn't alone. Marcus Webb, the man from the school security footage, was with him, and both were carrying crowbars. Well, well. Working late, hero. Derek's voice was a sneer, dripping with contempt. Thought you could mess with me and my business? Cost me my partner? Make me look weak? Charlie stood slowly, setting down his tools, his hands raised slightly to show he wasn't a threat. I don't want trouble. I just helped someone who needed help. That's all. That's all? Derek laughed, a harsh sound. You put Travis in prison. You made me look like I couldn't handle my own business. And then you had to go and involve the cops. Make it personal. He advanced into the shop, Marcus following close behind. But now I'm going to make you understand what happens when you disrespect me. And then I'm going to pay a visit to that pretty little nurse and your kid. Show them what respect looks like. The threat against Rebecca and Mason was the trigger Bear had been waiting for. Phoenix PD, drop your weapons and get on the ground, now! Bear's voice boomed from the office as he stepped out, gun drawn, with Tommy and Frank flanking him. Derek spun, eyes wide with shock, and then fury as he realized he'd been set up. For a split second, Charlie thought he might actually comply. But then Derek's expression hardened, and he lunged. Not at the armed men, but at Charlie, the crowbar raised high. Charlie dove to the side, the crowbar missing his head by inches and slamming into the motorcycle behind him with a sickening crunch of metal. Marcus tried to run for the door, but Tommy was faster, tackling him to the ground in a move that would have made his Marine Corps drill instructors proud. Bear trained his gun on Derek, who stood frozen, the crowbar still in his hand, breathing hard. Drop it, Sullivan. It's over. Police are already on their way. You can make this easy or hard, but either way, you're going back to prison. The sound of sirens cut through the night air. Martinez and the patrol units were coming. Derek's shoulders sagged in defeat, and the crowbar clattered to the concrete floor. You set me up, he said, looking at Charlie with pure hatred. You're a dead man. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually, you're dead. Shut up and get on the ground, Bear ordered, his voice leaving no room for argument. Within minutes, the shop was swarming with police. Derek Sullivan and Marcus Webb were handcuffed and read their rights, their threats, and violent intent captured on the security cameras Charlie had installed weeks ago. Officer Martinez approached Charlie, who was leaning against his workbench, shaking with adrenaline. You did good, she said quietly. We've got him on attempted assault with a deadly weapon, criminal threatening, and stalking, on top of the original charges. With what Travis already testified to, Derek's looking at 20 to 30 years minimum. He won't be a threat to you or anyone else for a very long time. Charlie nodded, unable to speak. The reality of what had just happened was sinking in. How close Derek had come to hitting him with that crowbar. How easily things could have gone wrong. But it was over. Finally, truly over. Bear clapped him on the shoulder. Let's get you home. Mason's probably waiting up for you. That night, back at Bear's house, Charlie held Mason tight and told him everything was okay now, that the bad man had been caught and wouldn't hurt anyone anymore. Mason, with the resilience of children, simply nodded and asked if they could go home tomorrow. Yeah, buddy. We can go home tomorrow. 2 months later, Charlie stood in the doorway of his shop, watching the Arizona sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. The Indian Scout he'd been working on the night of Derek's arrest was finished now, gleaming under the overhead lights, ready for pickup by its owner. Business was good. Better than good, actually. The story of what had happened had spread through the community, and suddenly everyone wanted their bikes worked on by the hero mechanic who took down a criminal. Charlie didn't feel like a hero. He felt like someone who'd made a series of risky decisions that happened to work out, who'd put his son in danger and nearly gotten himself killed in the process. But he'd also learned something important, that community mattered, that standing up for others was worth the risk, and that sometimes the right thing to do was also the hardest thing to do. Mason adjusted better than Charlie expected. He'd had a few sessions with a child therapist who specialized in trauma, and while he still had occasional nightmares, they were becoming less frequent. The experience had changed him, made him more aware of the world's dangers, but also more confident in his ability to handle them. He talked about becoming a police officer when he grew up, which both terrified and filled Charlie with pride. The Desert Riders had officially voted Charlie in as a full member, and he now wore their patch with a mixture of honor and responsibility. Bear had been right. Being part of a brotherhood meant never facing threats alone, and that security was worth more than Charlie had realized. The club had taken on a protective role for Rebecca too, checking in on her, making sure she felt safe as she returned to work at the hospital. Rebecca. Charlie smiled thinking about her. What had started as a connection forged in trauma had slowly evolved into something more. They'd been dating for 6 weeks now, taking it slow, understanding that both of them had healing to do. She was gentle with Mason, never trying to replace his mother, but offering her own kind of warmth and stability. Mason adored her, especially since she let him help her bake cookies, and never minded when he asked a million questions about what nurses did. Just yesterday, Rebecca had mentioned maybe moving back to Prescott Valley permanently, getting an apartment closer to the hospital and to Charlie's house. The suggestion had filled Charlie with a cautious hope he hadn't felt in 3 years. The possibility of building something new, of letting someone else into the carefully protected space he and Mason occupied. "Dad! Rebecca's here!" Mason's shout came from the house next door to the shop, where Charlie had left him playing video games while finishing up for the day. Charlie locked up the shop and walked the short distance to find Rebecca's Honda Civic in the driveway, and Rebecca herself sitting on the porch swing with Mason, both laughing at something on his tablet. She looked up when she heard Charlie approach, and her smile, genuine, warm, alive, reminded him why he'd stopped that night in the alley. Not because he was a hero, but because some people were worth saving, and some connections were worth fighting for. "Hey," she said, standing up and giving him a quick kiss on the cheek. "How was your day?" "Good. Finished the Indian Scout. Clients picking it up tomorrow." Charlie sat down on the swing beside her, pulling Mason onto his lap even though the boy was getting too big for it. "What are you two troublemakers up to?" "Rebecca says we can go camping next weekend. Can we, Dad?" "Please." Mason's eyes were bright with excitement. Charlie looked at Rebecca, who shrugged. "I thought it might be nice. There's a campground up near Prescott National Forest that's supposed to be beautiful. I checked. Bear and Jenny want to come too. Make it a group thing. Tommy and Frank said they might join us." The idea of camping, of being in the open with his son and the people who'd become his extended family, should have terrified him after everything they'd been through. But instead, it felt like exactly what they needed. A chance to reclaim normal life, to make new memories that weren't about violence and fear. "Yeah," Charlie said, squeezing Mason tight. "Yeah, let's do it." That evening, after Rebecca left and Mason was asleep, Charlie sat on his back porch with a beer and his phone. He scrolled through his messages and found the one from Officer Martinez from earlier that week. Derek Sullivan pleaded guilty to all charges, sentenced to 28 years without possibility of parole for 15. Travis Morgan got 12 years. Thought you'd want to know you're safe now. Really, truly safe. Safe. The word had felt foreign for so long. But now Charlie was starting to believe it again. Derek was gone, locked away where he couldn't hurt anyone. Travis was gone too. The nightmare that had started in a dark alley was finally, definitively over. Charlie thought about Sarah, about what she would think of everything that had happened. She'd probably scold him for being reckless, for not thinking things through before jumping into danger. But she'd also understand why he did it. Because that's who he was, who she'd loved. Someone who couldn't turn away from people in need. "I hope I'm doing okay, Sarah," he whispered to the night sky. "With Mason, with the shop, with Rebecca. I hope you'd be proud of us." The stars above offered no answer, but Charlie felt a sense of peace settle over him anyway. His life wasn't perfect. It never would be, but it was his, built on choices he'd made, mistakes he'd learned from, and connections he'd fought to protect. He had a son who was brave and compassionate, friends who would stand with him against any threat, a woman who understood his scars and loved him anyway, and a community that had his back. 3 months later, Charlie stood in Mountain View Cafe, the same cafe where he'd first met Rebecca for coffee. Surrounded by the desert riders, his mother, Rebecca's family who'd driven up from Phoenix, and what felt like half the town of Prescott Valley. The occasion was the grand reopening of Hunnam's custom bikes, now expanded with a second garage bay and a classroom space where Charlie and Bear would teach motorcycle safety and repair to local teenagers. The expansion had been Rebecca's idea, her way of turning something positive from the trauma they'd endured. "You saved my life," she'd said. "Now teach others to save lives too. Through safe riding, through community, through looking out for each other." Mason cut the ribbon with oversized ceremonial scissors, grinning broadly as cameras flashed and people applauded. At 9 years old now, he was taller, more confident, with Sarah's smile and Charlie's stubborn determination. He understood, in the way that children who've seen darkness understand, that life could be fragile and dangerous. But he also understood that it could be beautiful and worth protecting. After the ceremony, as guests toured the new facility and sampled food from the catering truck Bear had hired, Rebecca pulled Charlie aside. They stood in the new classroom, surrounded by tools and workbenches, still smelling of fresh paint and possibility. "I have something to tell you," she said, and Charlie's heart jumped with a dozen different possibilities, good and bad. "Okay," he said cautiously. "I got the apartment. The one on Miller Valley Road, 10 minutes from here. I'm moving back to Prescott Valley next week." Rebecca's smile was nervous, hopeful. "I know we've been taking this slow, and I don't want to pressure you, but I can't keep living 4 hours away from you and Mason. You're my family now, Charlie. Both of you." Charlie felt something loosen in his chest, a tightness he'd been carrying since Sarah's death that he hadn't even realized was there. "You're our family too," he said simply, and pulled her into a hug. Over Rebecca's shoulder, he could see through the classroom window into the main garage where Mason was showing Bear's nephew how to check tire pressure, his small hands confident and knowledgeable. He saw Bear and Jenny laughing with his mother, saw Tommy and Frank arm wrestling in the corner while a crowd cheered them on, saw all these lives interconnected because of one terrible night that had somehow led to this, to community, to family, to healing. "Thank you," Charlie whispered into Rebecca's hair. "For what?" she asked, pulling back to look at him. "For screaming that night, for being brave enough to survive, for letting me help you, for helping us in return." Charlie smiled. "For everything." Rebecca kissed him, soft and gentle, a promise of more to come. "Thank you for stopping." for being the kind of man who couldn't drive past someone in need, for showing Mason what courage really looks like. They rejoined the party, hand in hand, and Charlie felt the weight of the past 2 months finally lift. Derek Sullivan was in prison. Travis Morgan was in prison. The nightmares were fading, and in their place was something better. A shop full of friends, a son who was thriving, a woman who loved him, and a future that looked brighter than anything Charlie had dared to imagine. That night, after everyone had gone home and the shop was locked up, Charlie, Mason, and Rebecca sat on Charlie's back porch, watching the stars come out over the Arizona desert. Mason was between them, his head on Rebecca's shoulder, already half asleep. "Dad?" Mason murmured, his voice drowsy. "I'm glad we helped her that night, even though it was scary." "Me too, buddy. Me too." Charlie looked at Rebecca, who was watching Mason with such tenderness that it made his heart ache in the best way. "You know what I think?" Rebecca said softly. "I think we were all meant to find each other. Not in some magical fairy tale way, but in a real way. We went through something terrible together, and instead of letting it destroy us, we let it connect us. That's pretty special." Charlie nodded, unable to speak past the emotion in his throat. She was right. Out of violence and fear and trauma had come something unexpected. A family, cobbled together from broken pieces, but stronger for having been tested. As the night deepened and the desert air cooled, they sat together in comfortable silence. Mason fell asleep completely, and Charlie carried him inside to bed, tucking him in and brushing the hair back from his forehead, just as he'd done every night for 9 years. "Love you, buddy," he whispered. "Love you too, Dad," Mason mumbled, not quite awake. "Tell Rebecca I love her too." Charlie's breath caught. They'd been careful not to push, to let Mason's feelings develop naturally. Hearing those words felt like a gift, like permission to move forward into whatever future they were building together. Back on the porch, he relayed Mason's message to Rebecca and watched her eyes fill with tears. "He said that? He said that." Charlie pulled her close, and they sat together under the stars, two people who'd survived the worst and found each other in the aftermath. Somewhere across town, in the maximum security wing of Arizona State Prison, Derek Sullivan lay on a narrow bunk, angry and bitter, plotting a revenge that would never come. But his story didn't matter anymore. What mattered was here, in this house, on this porch, with these people who'd chosen to build something good from the ashes of trauma. Charlie Hunnam had stopped that night in the alley because it was the right thing to do. He hadn't known it would cost him his peace of mind, his sense of security, his normal life. But he also hadn't known it would give him Rebecca, would strengthen his relationship with Mason, would connect him to a community that would stand with him through anything. If given the choice to go back and drive past that alley, to protect himself and Mason from everything that followed, would he do it? Charlie considered the question seriously as he held Rebecca and listened to the desert night sounds, crickets chirping, a distant coyote howling, the wind rustling through the mesquite trees. No, he wouldn't change a thing, because the man he was, the man Sarah had loved, the man he wanted Mason to become, was someone who stopped when he heard someone screaming, who risked everything to protect the vulnerable, who stood up to bullies and criminals even when it was terrifying. That was who Charlie Hunnam was, and he wouldn't trade that for anything. "What are you thinking about?" Rebecca asked, breaking the comfortable silence. "Just that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be," Charlie said, "with exactly the people I'm supposed to be with." Rebecca smiled and kissed him again, longer this time, full of promise and possibility. And as they sat together under the vast Arizona sky, Charlie finally allowed himself to believe that the worst was truly behind them. and that the future, whatever it held, would be faced together. The story that had begun with a scream in a dark alley had ended here, in light and love and community. And that, Charlie thought, was the best possible ending he could have hoped for.